Hello again. Welcome back to the GamesIndustry.biz Investment Summit Online, sponsored by Xsolar. Our next session is a panel on how to pitch your game and company. If you have any questions, of course, please ask them in the chat area of YouTube. I'll keep checking them and I'll pop back in at the end and ask some questions as well. But I'll now pass you over to the host of the panel from GamesIndustry.biz, James Batchelor. Over to you, James.
Thanks, Jamie. Hello, I'm James Batchelor. I'm UK editor of GamesIndustry.biz. Joining me on this How to Pitch Your Game panel, we have Christina Seeley, CEO of Modus Games. Hi, Christina.
Hi.
We have John Paulson, Portfolio Director at Humble. Hello, John.
Hey, everyone.
And Harry Hamer, Analyst at London Venture Partners. Hello, Harry.
Hey, everyone.
Marvellous. Now, we have actually got a shorter panel session than all the other panels. So like pitches, we need to keep this short and sweet, straight to the point. What is the most important thing that you hope to understand from any pitch you're given? What do you need to know? Anyone?
I guess I can jump in.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I guess for us, we're a little different, or at least I'm different from the other two panelists here, in that we take an equity stake in the underlying business. So we're investing into the company rather than necessarily the product, and therefore we need to take a bet on the team. So I guess my underlying question will be why you're doing this, because being a founder can be extremely rewarding, and there's an opportunity to affect millions of lives with your games. But at the same time, it's really stressful, and the expected probability is that you'll fail with your startup, to put it frankly. But if you're willing to make that bet and explain why you're the right person for that job, then we'll have more confidence in your idea. And then the caveat to that is, as VC investors, is there an opportunity to return our fund with an investment into your company? Because again, with most companies at the early stage failing, we need the winners, and we need your company to return all the money we invested into companies that fail.
John?
Right. So yeah, we fund mostly on the project level, so I'm definitely looking more towards what kind of game you're making, and this would be to see how you understand how your game's going to stand out in the super crowded market. So, creativity and innovation, sure, but also an understanding, some kind of business acumen to show me that you understand where your game will be positioned in the market X years from now when it launches.
I think for us, primarily, we look for is the game fun. We start there, because if the game isn't fun, then because like John, we fund at the project level, not in the company itself. Although we do a lot of diligence into the kind of the stability of the company and their ability to manage a project through completion, and the life cycle of the whole game. And so we do due diligence, although we're not taking a stake in the company. We don't own and take the IP. But the first thing that's most important to understand when somebody's pitching a game is it fun? Okay,
fair enough. Good key takeaways to start with. Let's delve slightly deeper into them then. Like when you're receiving pitches, what is it that excites you? Beyond just like, is the game fun and things like that? Like what about a pitch or the way it's delivered makes you want to follow up and work with that developer on an ongoing basis?
I can start with this one. It's really important for us to see that not only does the studio have a real passion for the game itself, but that somebody internally also has a real passion for the game itself. So we're looking for that match of passion by the studio and then passion by somebody internally who it really resonates with. So it is more, because there's a lot of games that are fun, but there's games that move you and you have an emotional reaction to for whatever reason, because it's something interesting and new, or because the graphics are beautiful, or because the story is really compelling. There's a lot of different things that move you. We want to find that extra spark that both the studio has about the game itself and somebody internally.
Yeah, I guess I would follow up with that and echo some of the sentiments. It's, to put it succinctly, it's a clear and compelling pitch, exposing a big opportunity in the sector that leaves us wanting more. So there are elements of the passion that comes in, but I'd say it's more apt to compare it to, at least for me, investments are like dating. I think it was Brad Feld, who's the co-author of Venture Deals. I highly recommend if you're looking into raising venture capital funding, buy this book, have a read. It's really good. It's clear and concise about the stages of VC, and also breaking down some of the legal structure of how that goes. But he talked about first date energy, where we want to feel the time slip away when we're talking with you, and then keep wondering whether we'll ever meet you again. So it's FOMO, it's wanting, it's driving us to actually contact you rather than the other way around, and just keep us wanting more, really.
Yeah, so I'll take all their answers. I think we all kind of do somewhat similar, in that we're looking for something that stands out. Since the bulk of my job is looking at games, is feeling and seeing ideally something that sparks my imagination, and the developer that has gone out and done something, whether it's put out a GIF, whether it's gotten themselves into an event, whether it's actually developed, prototyped some kind of game for me to visualize, what this thing is that I'm gonna give hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, to. So those things that are going to excite me a bit more than just say a bullet list of words, because for what we do and how we work with teams is that we need to kind of understand that the team can make the game, and if it's their first game, we don't necessarily hold that against them, but we're going to need to see something tangible to get us a bit excited to pursue further.
Well, on that note, in an earlier panel we had earlier on today, someone said that they at least want to see a vertical slice, a playable vertical slice of the game, particularly. And this was more geared towards investors. Obviously, we're talking a bit broader. We're talking about pitching to both investors and publishers, and two of you are publishers. Is a vertical slice essential? Like, do people absolutely need to see something playable to get a sense of what the game is, or can it be got across in videos, GIFs, and presentations?
Yeah, I guess since I opened up that can of worms, I'll speak this time first. But to define vertical slice, as I understand it, is when you truly dissect a full game and get to see all its core features, mechanics. And we're not necessarily looking for a full vertical slice. It could be something that's more pre-alpha, at the prototype level, where we can at least experience, feel what the game is like to play at a basic level. Experience a couple core game loops, gameplay loops, and maybe a progression loop would be great. But yeah, I'm not expected to try every power up or every every mechanic that there is before we invest.
Yeah, I would say that we never require a vertical slice. That's too far along in the development process for most of the games that we're funding, because I guess also our expectations for a vertical slice are pretty high, so we don't put them. We don't make anybody deliver that before we would decide funding, because we want the vertical slice to be very game representative. Even if it's small, we want it to be pretty clean, like, representative of what final art would look like and things like that. So it's an expensive proposal to get for a studio to get all the way to vertical slice without funding. So for us, we're more looking for prototype so that we can get a feel for the game. Like John said, you just want to feel for what it's going to look like, a very thorough GDD. And then, and we usually do not fund prior to prototype. We want you to have something that we can play with a very well written and clear GDD. The only times that we go around that rule is more if it's a sequel and it's a game where we already have good representation of what that studio can do from a previous game. And if we're looking at a sequel, then we might not require completely a prototype.
And just to provide our perspective, I guess we're fairly unique in the industry, and so far as we're conviction investors. and there are very few of us around. There isn't really a too early for us. If anything, the fact that we only invest into gaming companies and we've got a wealth of experience from the games ecosystem means that actually, if anything, we prefer it to come in before we see anything with prototypes and whether it be vertical slice. Those are helpful, but for us, it's about understanding why the idea is good in the first place. And for example, we came in and invested into Singularity 6 when the two founders had just left Riot and they'd just pulled together their first deck, and we're the first investor that they spoke to. They didn't have anything else other than themselves, and that's all that's necessary for us.
Harry, quick question for you. I am keeping an eye on the YouTube comments. Thank you to everyone who's thrown in questions. I'm going to be asking a few of those to the panel in a moment. But first of all, Jesse Himmelstein asked, what was the name of the book that you just mentioned, Harry?
Oh, Venture Deals. It's by Brad Feld and I think it's Jason Mendelsohn. I've got it in my bookshelf somewhere. But if you just search Venture Deals book, it should come up on Amazon.
I imagine Jesse is Googling frantically right now. More audience questions in a minute. I just want to go through a couple more of mine. One is obviously when you're pitching, particularly to investors, but also to publishers, I guess, you're not just, the developers shouldn't just be pitching their game, they're pitching themselves, the company, the team. How do they strike the balance between pitching the game, pitching the company? How much do you guys want to see of each?
I guess I'll jump in here as well, because I imagine this is almost more direct towards me, because for us, they're part of the same equation, but the game doesn't equal the company. And so it's actually only one of 5 evaluation factors for us. We've got the product, so their user understanding, monetization, design docs, milestones, but then also the market opportunity, the thesis, the model they have, competitive advantage, another being like fit with us. We invest at the seed stage, so before product and into the company, that it's actually in the game's ecosystem. And then financial opportunity, what's the funding requirements, valuation, exit opportunity, and then also the team. So what's the team composition, what's the domain knowledge required within this genre, and does the team have it? Also, morals and integrity, I think that's an undervalued one, just that we're going to be with this company for a long time, potentially 8 to 10 years if you look at some of the data on exits, and that means that it can be longer than some marriages, and therefore you've got to understand who the person that you're investing into really is, and therefore whether they're going to be with you through the lows as well as the highs.
Yeah, even though on the publisher side, we're not, in most cases, we're not doing a deal for 8 to 10 years like Harry would be doing, it's still very important to understand the team, because it's going to take 2 years for the game to be developed and then launched, and then the life cycle after that. So the relationship that's established both during the pitch and during the negotiations and before any agreement is signed is really a key indicator of success of the game. And over the course of my career, I've always found that if the beginning part is rough and we have a hard time getting through a negotiation, the likelihood that that game is going to be very successful is kind of low, because it's, the game development is very complex and it's going to go a lot of different sideways over the course of development, and we need to be able to work together. And so how we work together in the beginning during the pitch and during the negotiations is kind of a key indicator of what's going to happen during the life of the relationship. And I think also when you're asking about the balance between the team and the game, I would say for us, it's probably 60% the game, 40% the team. And on the team, what we want to hear is not just who you have, but we want to hear who you don't have. What have you already identified that are going to be gaps in your existing team that you would need help from us or help from someone else? It's super, super important for us to see that somebody has the self-awareness to know what their team can and can't do in the beginning, because then it helps us be more of a benefit to that team, and it helps us identify ways that we can support them. But if somebody's coming in saying, no, we've got it all covered, we totally have it, there's not going to be any issues, you know, we've only allowed 2 weeks for QA, then we're like, wait, no, here, you know, there we can tell that they don't have the kind of self-awareness of what they can and can't do.
John, anything to add?
Point. I was going to say it's kind of dependent on where you are at in the project, how much you kind of balance one of those two things. If you're trying to pitch pre-production, yeah, you're going to end up giving me a little bit more information about the team, about you, about what your needs are. Hopefully experience that you've had in the past working on games or other transmedia versus, you know, if the game is further along, I always prefer a pitch to start with the game. Show me the game right away, and then you've captivated me, as opposed to spending, you know, 10 of 30 minutes walking me through your team and the games you've made in the past. You know, I can get that pretty quickly, just from some bullet points. Tell me your game and sales numbers if you know, if you feel like it. But hopefully, you know, I'm doing my job and I'm aware of the stuff you've done in the past, and I'm, you know, super curious about what you want to make with me. And definitely, well, what Christine said as well. Give me the things that you're lacking, because that's sort of what we need to help bring to the table too.
I'm going to kind of delve into that then. I'm going to combine a viewer question with one I had. Corundum Games asked, what are some signs that a pitch is trying too hard? And similarly, I was going to ask you guys, how much detail is too much detail?
Yeah, I would say that's a really hard balance, and a lot of it depends on the time that you have. Sometimes your meetings are only 30 minutes, so you've got to get really tight in your pitch because it's a very short amount of time, and so you really need to stick with the high level core mechanics. I would say stay away from any kind of character building in a pitch. Like, we don't want to hear the backstories of all of the different, you know, NPCs in your game. You know, we don't need that level of detail. We do need, like, how long is the game going to be? How many, if it's a narrative based game, how many chapters, how many stories, you know, just really the high level. And I think John mentioned it earlier. What is the key differentiator? Like, what is the spark in the game? And kind of hone into that, because all of us are looking at games all day, every week, week in, week out. So we're seeing a lot. So we get what, you know, frame it up for us so that we know what genre it's in, and then tell us about the differentiators.
I'd give a practical tip. If you know your meeting's 30 minutes, don't plan a 30-minute pitch. It's a conversation that we should have, especially if you excite me. I'm gonna have questions, and yeah, so maybe plan at most half of the time being the pitch. But the more time you have to actually talk with the person that you're pitching to, the more chances you have to engage with them, to kind of tailor it on the fly and figure out each other's needs and how it's going to be like to work together. We won't have any interaction, if you know, any indication of our interactions, if we spend the whole time, if I spend my whole time watching your pitch and you spend it just regurgitating.
Yeah, no, I would echo that. Just be engaging. Also, keep the pitch deck fairly short if you're going to share one. I find it useful to always think that humans are still animals who respond to certain stimuli that can be fairly low-tech and crude, i.e. that we think something's valuable when there's a paucity or a lack of information. And as in that isn't to then add credence onto cryptocurrency or anything, but it's true insofar as an investment decision that FOMO drives a lot of things. And so if you keep the information flows like strong, we have a collaborative nature in our discussions, but then don't overwhelm us with the information, then we'll slowly be drawn into your idea. I make, but the more you can do to have us chasing you rather than the other way around, I guess the better. But if you are looking to reach out or chase other people, then be as polite as possible and potentially use other introductions rather than chasing directly.
Got a question in the chat. This might be more for you, Harry, from Matt Hall. Are smaller projects still viable for funding? So projects with less than a year left of development, solo developers, low funding requirements, etc. Is that something that interests either you, Harry, but Modus and Humble as well?
I guess it really depends on the opportunity. If you're close to launch or soft launch, and that's helpful for us, we're able to get more data behind it. And actually, one of our more recent investments, Vila, we've been talking to them for a while, and we came in a bit later. But it all depends on how large the overall opportunity is. If you've already been funded before, and there's a small opportunity for us to come in and help with the business, then more than happy to chat. But the underlying game product itself, it needs to 10x our investment. That's like the rough metrics for VC when it comes in, and therefore we'll have to assess it on its own capabilities.
We take projects at all different stages, and so sometimes if it's a smaller project and it's very late stage and you only need funding for finishing, polishing, release management, QA, LOC, that kind of thing, we'll do those deals all the time. And we have different models depending on where we're coming in. And so we're looking at late stage, smaller games as much as we are games where we're in pre-production and only a prototype.
So yeah, I'd expand the definition of smaller games because I also look over the label Humble Originals that's made games like Kind Words, A Short Hike, and Bennett Foddy's Getting Over It. So, smaller scoped, more experimental games, we definitely have a track, I'll call it that, for those type of games. But also, yes, we do entertain the ability to provide finishing funds for games. But if you're coming at me with 3 to 6 months before release and you need, X amount of dollars, your game's got to be pretty far along to be at that point. I'm hoping it's not going to be still prototype, because then it shows me that you quite don't know what you should be doing a few months before launch. That should be polishing up your beta. And also, if you come to me too soon, or with not enough of a window, then we don't really have a time to build that marketing cycle that's required to get people excited about your game. If you don't have any social media channels built out yet, or a Steam store page or anything to show that for the X years you've been working on your game, there's been no activity over it. It's a little bit hard to jump in at the last minute in a couple months to immediately get X 100,000 wish lists on a game, from such a tight marketing cycle.
Cool. We've got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to throw in one last question from me and hopefully get to one from the audience. My question, given the circumstance at the moment, and indeed the very way in which we are conducting this panel session, how has the lockdown and the COVID-19 pandemic affected the pitching process? What do developers need to take into account when they're talking to publishers and investors virtually? Because I've heard of people demoing through Zoom and stuff, through video conferencing. What's different? What do they need to take into account?
I can start on this one. I think one of the things that's really important is to have your video strategy nailed down before you have the meeting. Don't try to run a video in Zoom on a screen share, send links beforehand, and then let somebody watch it on their own computer through a private YouTube, or do a Discord stream where you can talk over the stream on Discord, which is much, much more efficient than Zoom. Sorry, Zoom. I think that I would say the most important thing is have your video stuff kind of nailed down, your strategy, clear that strategy with the person that you're pitching so that they understand how they're going to be ingesting the content. And then like John mentioned before, don't plan on having your pitch take the whole time. I think that's the other thing, is that usually if you're doing Zoom pitches, you're kind of back to back. And so keeping it short and concise with a video strategy, I'd say, is important.
Yeah, for us, it hasn't affected us as much as some other, at least investors that we've been talking to. We actually just completed our first ever contactless investment. Sorry, excuse the pun. But it's definitely harder to meet new people and make those connections. And I do know there are some investors who aren't investing into anyone they haven't met in real life, which is obviously problematic for future investments. But for us, our portfolio stretch around the world, and so we don't see any reason as to stopping investment just because they're over on one side of America and we're able to talk with them through the internet, and that's not good enough of a connection. I feel like that's a weaker excuse, at least at the stage that we're coming in, where it's mainly based on vision and the people themselves. But I'd say good hygiene as usual, be prompt, have your materials ready, but then also try and liven up the experience and be personable, because we're all staring at screens for 10 hours straight, and we need something to brighten up our day.
Brilliant. I'm really sorry to interrupt everyone, but unfortunately we've run out of time. So thank you, James. Thank you for hosting that panel. That was brilliant.
No, sorry for overrunning.
Sorry.
Oh no, we're fine. We're fine. It was brilliant. I just wanted to keep it going as much as we could, really, because it was fascinating. But thank you to John and to Christina and to Harry as well. Our next session is in a couple of minutes' time with Cassia Curran from Wings, discussing is your indie game viable. You can watch this session on YouTube. Just get the link from investmentsummit.gamesindustry.biz.